Hey, Verballers. Today's show is brought to you in part by our good friends over at Navy Federal Credit Union. Navy Federal's got a mission to put members first by making their financial goals the priority. Receive a lifetime of membership benefits to help you and your family accomplish your life missions, like a full suite of financial products designed to fit your needs, 24/7 live support, and access to over 300 branches on or near military bases. Visit NavyFederal.org for more information. Call 1-888-842-6328 or download the Navy Federal Credit Union app. Message and data rates may apply. Navy Federal is federally insured by NCUA.
Welcome to the Solid Verbal. The Solid Verbal.
Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!
I've heard so many players say, well, I want to be happy. You want to be happy for a day? Eat a steak.
It's that woo-woo!
And now, Dan and Ty.
Welcome back to the Solid Verbal, boys and girls. My name is Ty Hildenbrandt, joining me as always over there in New York City. This fine but a little rainy Sunday morning, my good friend Dan Rubenstein. Sir, how are you?
I'm good. I'm researching medication to slow down this heartbeat and deal with some palpitations. The blood pressure is not my friend after yesterday. A lot of fun, weird, surprising, shocking, terrifying moments
Would
during,
you say
during week 6.
Secretly sassy?
Oh, it was so secretly sassy, Ty.
There was so much secret sass going on, a lot of alliteration there, but nonetheless, wow. It didn't disappoint week 6. As we said on the Wednesday show, not a ton of high-level matchups. It's certainly not on the level of week 7 when it comes to that. But nonetheless, a lot of solid matchups. And it did not disappoint between the Texas-Oklahoma game, between 3 games that we saw in the SEC, all of which were very interesting.
Yep.
We saw Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, which we'll get into at night.
Woo.
Miami, Florida State was a lot of fun. Utah, Stanford, if you stayed up late, a bit of an upset there. So certainly a lot to go around for college football fans of all makes and models.
Absolutely. And it was nice to be able to appreciate that without having to worry about an Oregon game kicking at 10:30 or watching Oregon blow out some terrible team like I had to do in September. It was nice to just focus all of my energies on, and nice is a relative word, but watching the Auburn offense or watching the Kentucky offense or watching, Texas barely hold on against Oklahoma. It was nice to have fandom just have nothing to do with week 6. I like that.
Well, we had a ton of tweets come in. We had a ton of reverbs come in. Again, don't forget, you can always find us at solidverbal.com. We're also on all social media channels, really. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. There's a subreddit at reddit.com/r/solidverbal. By Verballers, for Verballers. If you're a new listener, don't forget, next week, week 7, you can still get in on the pick'em pool. We do it week to week. And I should point out, before we go any further, there was an Easter egg. An Easter egg this week in our pick'em pool. Did you happen to notice that, Dan, when you were filling out yours?
I did see that Texas was favored by a touchdown instead of a dog by a touchdown. And that was just our little gift to you. And you may have taken it, and that didn't work out. Whoops.
Yeah, so a bit of an Easter egg, a small glitch in the matrix. We had people writing in like, did you know that? And yeah, we did know that. So hopefully everyone gobbled up those 7 Oklahoma points that we gave you out of the goodness of our heart.
Yep.
If not, if you were one of the few overconfident Texas fans, sorry, you did get the win over Oklahoma, just not by 7, though it looked like it might go that way for a pretty good chunk of that football game. Should we just jump into our reverbs, Dan? Should we do that? Get those out of the way?
Hit play on those, Ty. Do it.
Your week 6 reverbs, have a listen.
Big 12 after brunch is making this Saturday extra sassy.
Dan, Ty, this is Ray up in Dallas.
Hey Dan, hey Ty, it's Steph from San Antonio.
Jason from Pennsylvania here. Hey, this is Scott from Nashville.
Hi, this is Kelly from Austin, Texas.
Hi, this is Kyle calling from Annapolis, Maryland. And I just saw my Longhorns put together a near flawless butt whipping of Oklahoma for 3 quarters. So credit to the Sooners for blazing back and tying it up, and thank God for Dicker the kicker. Horns win. Texas is back.
How about that Texas-born, Texas-bred Heisman candidate, Sam Ehlinger? 5 touchdowns, almost 400 all-purpose yards?
Got to give credit where it's due. That Kyler Murray is one hell of a baseball player.
As an Ohio State fan, the name Tim Beck being used in the same sentence as shootout offense is probably the biggest surprise of 2018. That's a good game, Longhorns. Good job.
It is 3:32, and I would like to tell you that OU still sucks. Texas is pretty much back-ish. Go Horns.
Is Choklahoma back? Oklahoma? More like Joklahoma.
And I just watched my Texas A&M Aggies win a game in overtime in which Kentucky never ran a single offensive snap on our side of the 50. And I'm not sure if I'm impressed or depressed about that statistic, but either way, I'll take it.
Can I submit a dude alert for a punter? The Texas A&M kicker has an absolute leg cannon.
Sometimes you need a little bit of luck, and sometimes you need a whole lot of Trayveon Williams.
Just walking out of Kyle Field. Thank God for Mike Elko.
Well, Alabama said, screw the crock pot. I'm going to use the blowtorch on this hog.
Tua is the Heisman Trophy winner. Is there the possibility that Tua doesn't play in any fourth quarter until the SEC championship game? Man, he is good.
For the second week in a row, the Razorbacks have covered an obnoxiously large spread.
I think it's time the Georgia Bulldogs said, we want Bama.
I watched my Gators beat LSU, and it was glorious.
Auburn is the 8th best team in the SEC West.
Never been so happy to be wrong about that second half of the Notre Dame Virginia Tech game. See the Irish turn on those Jets and come away with the road win. That was awesome.
That Bud Foster defense looking real tender in this Notre Dame crock pot.
Looks like you left some rancid ham in that lunch pail of yours, Bud. Go Irish.
My Hokies still have the best entrance in college football. But boy, we took it on the chin against Notre Dame.
So the fair's in town, and today's featured ride is score a 50-plus yard rushing touchdown against the Wake D. Anybody and everybody, come on out. Just 3 tickets.
Trevor Lawrence may have won the battle of freshman quarterbacks today in Winston-Salem. But according to the young women of my household, Sam Hartman is good looking.
If I wanted to watch a 4-hour-long parade of human suffering, I would have rented a Werner Herzog movie. Go Noles.
We did it! I have no voice, but I'm calling from East Lansing, coming home from a Cats victory.
Utah is officially the team in the Pac-12 that ruins the Pac-12's playoff chances.
Please, 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 can we get a dramatic reading of Navy's offensive possessions against Air Force this week?
So, callers, yeah, want to reverb with the ballers? Well, make a pun. Sing it out. Even Herb Street's got to shout. Texas is back.
All right, there you go. Thank you again for calling in. 408-VERBAL-1. Your phone number, 408-837-2251. As with every college football Saturday, please feel free to give us a call. Very stream of consciousness, our reverbs. Just in the moment, at the bar, on your couch at home, whenever you're watching the games or just feeling something as part of watching the game, give us a phone call. Let us know what's on your mind. Get it off your chest.
We're your virtual shoulder.
We are the virtual shoulder. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's get started with Texas 48, Oklahoma 45. True to form, Mr. Rubenstein, this was indeed a Red River Shootout. 93 points, 1,033 yards of total offense, a great football game. Freshman kicker Cameron Dicker drills
Dicker the kicker
a 40-yard field goal with 9 seconds left to give Texas a huge victory. That was, of course, after Texas squandered a 21-point lead at the start of the fourth quarter. Oklahoma came back, made it interesting, tied the football game up, but ultimately Texas gets the W. What were your thoughts and emotions while watching the Red River Shootout?
1, Texas's offense was fun to watch consistently, not just big plays up the seam to Colin Johnson or Lil Jordan Humphrey, but they were timely. They had a plan. They kept moving the ball, especially in the red zone on the goal line, going Sam Ehlinger right. The tight ends were doing a good job setting the edge. It looked like a Texas offense with more of a plan and better execution than we were used to seeing. And also, Kyler Murray is extremely fun to watch.
So good. He's so fast.
He is incredibly fast. He makes that mistake early on. He has a mistake late with that fumble, but his ceiling as a playmaker is astronomically high. And for Texas to weather the Kyler Murray storm was impressive. And they have, it looks like 3 more top 20-ish, I tweeted this out, offenses in the coming weeks in West Virginia, Oklahoma State, and Texas Tech. So the more they can weather and not give up leads, I suppose, the better. But overall, an incredibly impressive day from Texas, a mostly incredibly impressive day from Oklahoma's offense. I don't know where we go hoping that Oklahoma's defense improves under Mike Stoops, because the evidence at this point with more and more of his and this defensive staff's players indicates that they are going to just be average. Right, and that's taking into account, adjusting for tempo, adjusting for situation, where like they are an average national defense, whereas teams like Texas or TCU or even Iowa State last year, what we saw from Oklahoma State at times, that even though they give up points, it's over a ton of drives because these teams score quickly. So at this point, with what Lincoln Riley gives the Sooners on offense, I don't know how you can just settle for what he's getting on defense.
One thing we should bring up, we didn't even really mention the name Sam Ehlinger, but a monster effort from him. 314 and 2 touchdowns through the air, 72 yards and another 3 touchdowns on the ground. Our friends over at Pro Football Focus, the college edition, broke it down on Twitter and said that Ehlinger was 16 of 18 for 226 yards and a touchdown, throwing over the middle of the field against Oklahoma. That was really the difference in this game, at least through the air, where Ehlinger was able to get some of his. He had an incredible effort, and of course went mano a mano with Kyler Murray in just a really fun offensive showdown, shootout, whatever you want to call it. Classic. A big win here for Texas. By the way, just as a personal aside, if I could.
Please.
Probably a top 25 moment of my life when Fox came back from commercial to the camera shot that I posted on Twitter with the, the kid holding up the homemade Texas is back.
Oh, sign. Texas is back.
Scribbled on a notebook, on a piece of notebook paper.
I wonder if he was a plant to sort of start the conversation.
He was probably a verbaler, to be honest.
Oh, yeah, that's entirely on the table. And before we move on from this game, it's worth mentioning that Lil Jordan Humphrey, aside from just being a fun name to say, is a fun name to watch, because he is one of the best all-purpose players in the country. I know he didn't really do anything on the ground yesterday or in the return game, but he has that early touchdown pass, and he is just, any screen with him all of a sudden goes from 6 to 26. And that is, especially given his size and, how much he stands out on the field, a crazy impressive player to watch. That is the most impressive part, I would say, of this Texas offense.
Let's move on to the 3-headed monster of SEC games that we saw throughout the course of yesterday. Let's start in Gainesville with Florida 27, LSU 19. Dan, only one member of the broadcasting duo had the foresight, I would say the cojones, the gumption to predict that one team in this game would finish with 19 points.
That's true, Ty. You did. Did you take LSU, though?
I took Florida plus the points. We agree.
Okay, so we both did.
You talked me into it.
Yeah. Florida's defense has improved over the course of the season, and one of our main points has been that the Kentucky loss isn't nearly as bad as it appeared in the moment.
Yeah, well, that's
and especially
true.
After their performance yesterday, too, defensively at least, it holds up. My takeaways from this Florida LSU game are basically what they were going in. Felipe Franks doesn't complete half of his passes, but he makes big plays aside from that, seemingly huge interception that he threw into the end zone. But it is that chopped top chef thing where offensively Florida gets enough. LaMichael Pirine has some big runs. Jordan Scarlett powers through well enough. I think their receivers are probably underrated, and eventually they will have a receiving core that produces in a big way. You know, Van Jefferson is somebody I like watching. Hammond is somebody I like watching. The story of the game to me was Florida's defense, and with LSU having opportunities to go downfield, Florida's defense kept coming through and stopping any momentum. And LSU is a team that has performed well, at least away from Baton Rouge, both in the neutral site against Miami and then against Auburn on the road. And ultimately having to constantly make big plays. And Joe Burrow did make a couple of those. It was 4th and 19. That was the yardage that came through late. But having to make those plays consistently, putting your own offense in that position to have to make big plays, I think ultimately was LSU's undoing. And it becomes more difficult against a Florida defense that was just, Jaquai Polite, another huge game, just basically lived in LSU's backfield. And ultimately, Florida's ability to dominate on both lines was the difference. And the score, is 27-19. That was a pick six at the end.
Right.
It was really impressive to see. We're used to seeing Florida defensive lines coming through, but for Florida to handle LSU's defense like they did felt like a big step forward for the Gators.
Yeah, it wasn't the cleanest of games. I don't know if anyone thought it would be otherwise, but we saw 4 turnovers, 19 penalties, a combined 8 of 30 on third downs, really a defensive-minded game. But LSU definitely had more trouble with Florida's front. I was impressed with how Florida ran the football. It's been a while since I watched a Florida game, and it felt like they had a cohesive ground attack between LaMichael Pirine, who ran angry in this football game, and even Jordan Scarlett. Both of them I thought were exceptional, maybe not eye-popping numbers, but really did get the job done. I was impressed with Florida here, and you're right. We'll talk about A&M and Kentucky in a little bit. Specifically, Kentucky on defense is a pretty valid opponent for not just other SEC teams, really anyone in the country. They play angry along their defensive front. And perhaps we've come to a point where we need to reevaluate how Kentucky, how Florida, how Mississippi State figure into the mix here in the SEC. But specifically, as it relates to this game, a nice win for Florida. I will say this, though. Florida next week at Vandy may be a once-in-a-lifetime letdown look-ahead sandwich game.
That's true.
And maybe it's an open-faced game because it's not truly an opponent on the other side of the Vandy game. It's a bye. But we've got, obviously, a huge win at home over LSU, on the road next week at Vandy, then a bye week, and then Georgia. So I feel like there's an opportunity next week to play a sound and maybe take a home dog skew on the Vanderbilt Commodores.
Yeah, Vandy has scored 13.5 points. They've averaged 13.5 points in their last 2 SEC games. They get killed by Georgia and lose comfortably to South Carolina. So I think Florida may win that game ugly in a 20-11 kind of way.
Exactly. Oh, exactly.
But I don't see Vandy really bringing it to the wire.
Big win though for the Florida Gators. Again, 27-19. They win at home, and onward they go. Let's stay in the SEC. Texas A&M 20, Kentucky 14. So this game went to overtime, and it featured a giant doink. A giant doink off the crossbar on a 43-yard field goal, which isn't something you see a whole lot of. But especially on a day where a Missouri kicker hit a 57-yarder about midway up the net on a wet field. So college kickers have gotten better, it feels, over the course of time. Not often you see a doink off the crossbar on a 43-yarder. But this one goes to overtime, in large part due to Kentucky's defense, which got a really big play on a strange Kellen Mond blunder with about 4 minutes left. A&M is up 14-7. Most importantly, at that point, they're covering the point spread, seeing as how they were my lock of the week. Mond does this little pirouette in the backfield. I don't know what he's trying to do. Puts the ball on the ground. Kentucky scoops and scores it. That's how they end up tying it up.
Well, it appears Texas A&M recovers it before an offensive lineman also just buffs it over
Thank you.
Kentucky player. Yeah.
Important clarification.
Yeah.
Then the game goes to overtime. Then we have Kentucky doinking it off the crossbar. And then eventually Trayveon Williams running it into the end zone for the W. I was impressed with Kentucky's defense. It's apparent that I've underestimated them throughout the course of the season. I was also impressed with A&M's defense because Kentucky was held to just 178 total yards of offense. Benny Snell rendered mostly ineffective, just 60 yards on the ground. A&M, again, it wasn't a pretty game, wasn't a pretty W, but they did get the job done. It was technically over a top 15 opponent and certainly one of the better defenses in the country. So good on them, good on Jimbo Fisher.
Yeah, Texas A&M, with as much as they struggled up front protecting Kellen Mond, who was okay. He made plays. And Trayveon Williams, by the way, because he was, sort of MIA last year. When he hits that second level, I involuntarily just go, whoop! Like, I'm just ready for him to break something for 83. And he just, the amount of time it takes for him to go from 3 to 11 is astounding. He is one of my most favorite players to just watch. Like, he is just visually exciting. And so it was fun watching him. He makes the play at the end of the game, and a really nice win for Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M to escape that, given, the issues giving the ball away that led to points. And Kentucky, for as good as they were on defense, they could have won this game without a single play run on Texas A&M's side of the field in the second half, which is both impressive and depressing. I don't know. There's something about Kentucky's offense that fills that nicely. I was disappointed. Obviously, they didn't give the ball to Benny Snell at all in their one overtime drive.
Weird bit of strategery there by Mark Stoops.
Yeah, Terry Wilson, for as impressive as he is athletically and buying himself time, he is not a quarterback, and we talked about this a little, to put the game on his shoulders. It's just, he's not there yet. Maybe he improves over the course of the season and develops into somebody a little bit more dependable with his arm. But this team, for better or worse, is going to depend on their defense, which football's one true Josh Allen has another excellent game for Kentucky. They had, and still do, I imagine, they have a safety. I think his name is Edwards, Mike Edwards, for Kentucky. He was all over the place for the Wildcats. So in a game in which the offense was that disappointing, to be in it and to lose on a crossbar, and man, I had Kentucky and the points, and it just felt like Texas A&M was going to win that with a field goal, and that would be fine for me.
Yeah.
And then Trayveon Williams doing that like helicopter flippy thing into the end zone at the game. Very exciting if you're a Texas A&M fan. And once again, just survive in advance if you're an Aggie fan. To beat a top 15 team at home, take it, move forward.
All right, and then let's stay in the SEC and talk about Mississippi State 23, Auburn 9. So, okay, Auburn's offense may not be getting any better this year. Is that a fair observation at this point through 6 weeks of the season?
I think they can improve. I think they have it within them to improve. They are, as we talked about preseason, I think they're much more of a grower than a shower. But we're into October.
I mean, we're in October at this point.
More.
They had 90 yards on the ground, granted, against a pretty good defense.
I think good defense,
State.
yeah.
Pretty good defense, sure. But Auburn's calling has so much been the ground game since Gus Malzahn got there. That has really been the centerpiece of what they're doing, some of the creativity, getting guys in motion in space. Only 90 yards on the ground for Auburn. It's something we pointed to in the preseason when we did our previews for Auburn. We were curious, where was the efficiency going to come from on the ground for the Tigers? It's clear that they have not found it yet. Doesn't mean they won't, but at least in this game and for most of the season so far, it really has been a bit of a struggle bus to get going on the ground for the Tigers. Meanwhile, on the other side, Mississippi State seems to have figured out their ground game, almost 350 yards on the ground. You couple that with a pretty good defensive effort here. Not the most fun game in the world to watch. The whole game was basically one of your dramatic drive charts, if we're being honest. But
yep,
a 14-point win for Mississippi State here was a really nice way to get things going for Joe Moorhead. This is a good win for him.
Yeah, and avoiding the sort of emotional letdown of last week with Dan Mullen returning and losing that game and having another big opponent come in Auburn, and to stick with their plan. Obviously Joe Moorhead did not have Nick Fitzgerald throw the ball a ton because he is playing to his strengths. And as a quarterback, that is not necessarily his strength, throwing the ball downfield. But Nick Fitzgerald anyway goes on to set some SEC records for a running quarterback, eclipsing Tim Tebow, who I think was inducted into the Ring of Honor.
He was inducted into he was the sixth player to be inducted into the Florida Ring of Honor.
That's pretty good, and deservedly so. So Nick Fitzgerald, with Tim Tebow's same coordinator and Joe Moorhead, goes on to set some new records and was crazy impressive on the ground. And the defense held up really nicely and sort of forced Auburn's hand to abandon the running game at times. I liked watching Whitlow. He busted a couple of nice runs, but this was not a team that was patient with the run game. And when Auburn has succeeded, it's been because of whoever, Cameron Artis-Payne or Kerryon Johnson or Trey Mason. And we're not seeing that same sort of rhythm and confidence and consistency there. Jarrett Stidham, makes a couple of nice throws, but they can't finish drives. And it was tough to watch. I think you're right. As a football fan or as an Auburn fan, Ty, I have to. I should, right? I should pull up Dvorak, right?
You can do it if you want to, yeah. I mean, this was basically the whole game.
It was, yeah. Do you hear that, Ty?
I can hear it, yeah.
Auburn. Punt, field goal, missed field goal, punt, field goal, fumble, field goal, downs. Yeah, and these were, by the way, if we're going to be specific, and I won't play the music again, but it was 3 plays punt, 3 plays punt, 4 plays field goal, 11 plays missed field goal, 4 plays punt. Like it was quick inefficiency.
A lot of empty calories out there. Let's put it that way. All right. Auburn's got some work to do to get their offense sorted out. Big win for Mississippi
Their offensive
State.
line is a mess, is legitimately a mess.
It is. Okay. At night, ND, Notre Dame 45, Virginia Tech 23. I thought Notre Dame looked very good initially.
Mm-hmm.
Then they slowed down.
Yeah, you could say that.
As the first half wore on, made some halftime adjustments, and then looked very, very strong in the second half. Got some big plays. The star of the game for me, for as much as we've talked about Ian Book, the star of the game for me was Dexter Williams. 2 weeks in a row now where we've seen really big, important efforts from him in this one. 178 on the ground, 3 touchdowns, including a big one, a 97-yard touchdown run early in the second half, which just really swung momentum in Notre Dame's favor. On the whole, Notre Dame, I'd say, had 4 or 5 big gaining plays that ultimately swung this thing in their direction. But included in that was, of course, that long run from Dexter Williams. I'd say a nice day for Ian Book, 25 of 35, something like that. Mm-hmm. The longer throws need work. I was having flashbacks. I posted this on Twitter to Max Whittick, the halcyon days of Max Whittick at USC on some of these deeper throws, because he had guys streaking down the field wide open and he wasn't anywhere close to them. He's got to get that figured out. I know that was the rub on him preseason when we were just musing over whether or not it should be him or Wimbush. Book has not been known as a longer thrower, so perhaps they can work on that and fine tune the accuracy. But look, it's all gravy at this point. Notre Dame's 6-0. The final 6 games are there for Notre Dame's taking if they want to go out and grab that playoff spot. I don't want to jinx it, but it's time to get real. Look at the schedule. It's there as long as they can keep doing what they've been doing the last couple weeks now. They've been really impressive since Ian Book came in.
Yeah, and I would say even aside from opponents and looking at playoff potential, whatever, because that'll sort itself out, if you just look inward. So Notre Dame has found much more consistency at quarterback than I think Notre Dame's were anticipating going into the season.
It's fair, and I think Kirk Herbstreit was the one who brought it up in the broadcast, and he was 100% right. Some of the shorter passes, some of the medium range passes that, in his words, were gimmies, that Notre Dame had missed in recent years. They're just not missing with Ian Book. They're making a lot of those smaller plays very meaningful. That in and of itself has been a bit of a revelation for the offense.
Yeah, you want to stack up as many 3rd and 2s as opposed to 3rd and 7s as possible.
Sure.
Give yourself a shot in Ian Book. So Notre Dame now can say, one, they have a quarterback who gives them a shot to consistently move the ball downfield and give the ball to fast playmakers. You have a clear number 1 running back to sort of take the mantle from Josh Adams and Dexter Williams. And there is a clear number 1 receiver, which hasn't always been the case these past few years, in Miles Boykin, with other, talented options in, Alizé Mack and Chase Claypool, whoever. And then on all 3 levels of this defense, and it's not just having playmakers, but it's, if one guy's not having a particularly effective day on defense, somebody else steps up. Yesterday was Kareem on the defensive line.
He was outstanding.
Kareem, and then Tavon Coney was everywhere, and Julian Love made plays. So Notre Dame, again, schedule aside, and I can pull it up right now, but we are listen, Pitt is now a winning team in the ACC. So Florida State's improved, Northwestern's improved, and that's on the road.
The Northwestern game's the tricky one.
Right, and that's post-Navy.
That's the one that freaks me out a little bit.
There is still potential, just because of talent and because of the fact that the game is on the road, that USC, like they have a couple of times under Clay Helton, is a much different looking team by the end of the season than what they look like in September.
For sure.
But as far as knowledge about both Notre Dame and their opponents, they're going to be favored. They should be favored, probably comfortably, in the rest of these games.
Oh, definitely.
So I think you can at least take this Sunday off from being stressed about Notre Dame.
Yeah, no, I take solace in the offense getting better and the defense being reliable. The defense has been outstanding this year. And, it was interesting to see. So they've got some injuries up front too. I won't talk too much about Notre Dame, but Dalen Hayes didn't make the trip. He was hurt. Right. Julian Aquara, he went down. No, he didn't go down. Julian Aquara was booted for targeting another defensive end. So to see how they responded when they were challenged, just from a depth perspective in their front 7, was interesting. And they did answer the call.
If you're a Virginia Tech fan, by the way, conversely, not to just only talk about Notre Dame, definitely disappointment situationally when they get down to the 1 yard line and have to kick a field goal.
Oh yeah, totally.
That was, and in the way that it happened with Ryan Willis running into a back on 3rd down, that, situationally Virginia Tech has a ways to go. And certainly the way Notre Dame sort of poured it on in the second half points to depth and the fact that, yes, Ryan Willis is a backup quarterback and they don't really get that much consistency on the ground. They have a couple of receivers I would imagine they like, Hazleton especially. So I think there are bright spots for the Hokies, but giving up 45 at home in, that atmosphere, it shouldn't happen against anybody maybe beyond Alabama. So Virginia Tech knows that they're thin on defense and not nearly with the talent that they've had these past few years. So take solace in the fact that if recruiting, improves or continues to go along this pace, the Hokies will be fine. And maybe they lose this game next year, or the next time they play, but it's going to be 30-26 or something.
All right. Miami 28, Florida State 27. This was a good football game. It ended up better if you're a Miami fan because Florida State was solid, rock solid for about 40 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it came a bit off the swivel. Miami's down 27-7 with around 12 minutes left in the 3rd quarter, and they rally.
Yeah.
Very quickly, they rally towards the latter half of the 3rd quarter. 3 second-half touchdown passes for N'Kosi Perry. Miami comes back to win by 1. At one point late in the 3rd quarter, Perry had 2 touchdown passes within 42 seconds, Dan.
It's pretty good.
It's really good. At the end of the day, he finishes with 4 touchdown passes in total. Not the best stat line for him, going, 13 of 32 or 33, I want to say. But ultimately gets the job done. Miami comes from behind to win this game. Mark Richt was all kinds of excited. I thought a step forward for Florida State, even in defeat.
Oh, for sure. Chronologically, Florida State's offense, especially with the offensive line issues that they still and will continue to have all year long, I thought did a pretty good job early on. Cam Akers pulled out some, the final stat line wasn't there, but pulled out some tough runs, as did Jaquez Patrick. And you mentioned N'Kosi Perry quickly throwing successive touchdown passes. That's on Miami's defense and special teams, making plays to put Florida State in that position. So all around, I was impressed with who, DeMarcus Christmas had a good game. Fred Jones, Brian Burns was everywhere. And so they gave Florida State that chance to get Miami's offense off the field and did a particularly good job overwhelming Miami's offensive line. And I know that call is probably infuriating to Florida State fans. The refs call that it was ultimately a forward pass. I didn't feel strongly either way. I understood the call, but if they let it slide, it probably would have been fine on that double pass touchdown that was called back. Miami gets fortunate because they miss a chip shot field goal that would have comfortably put them up, I think, by 4. But Florida State ultimately can't get it done. So I think I expected more from this Miami team against Florida State, but ultimately I think it speaks better of Florida State than it does unfortunate about Miami that, the Seminoles were in position to win this game given all that has been stacked up against them.
One final note on Florida State now in defeat. Florida State needs to beat 3 of these teams to gain bowl eligibility.
Okay.
Wake Forest.
Yep.
Clemson. NC State.
No, probably not.
Or Notre Dame.
Nope, probably not.
Boston College.
Maybe.
And Florida.
Oh, okay. So essentially the must-win game of those. So Wake gives them their best shot. Wake or Boston College.
I think it's NC State.
So NC State on the road is probably their best hope.
Yeah.
That's their must-win, which they have Wake. I think they have a bye week, but then they have Wake.
Yeah.
All right. So, if they lose the Wake game, they're pretty much toast because it's at Notre Dame, at NC State, but they host Florida. Okay. There's a shot. I'd put it at about 24%.
Yeah. All right.
Did they make a bowl game?
Let's move on to Utah 40, Stanford 21. Bryce Love did not play in this football game. This one, I got to admit, came out of nowhere a bit for me. Like, Utah putting up 40 points against anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody is a bit of a shocker. Maybe Stanford was a little weary from their matchup a week ago against Notre Dame, but 4 turnovers, 2 interceptions, 2 fumbles for the Cardinal. 42 yards on the ground without
and still
Bryce
in
Love.
this game in the fourth quarter. It was like 27-21 in the fourth.
Yeah. Thoughts on this one, Dan? This one really surprised me.
Yeah, Utah had played everybody tough on defense and really gave themselves a good shot to beat Wazoo on the road last week. So not shocking that Utah's pretty good because they are, at least that's like their baseline every season is pretty good. The big thing to me was since 2009, Stanford's always had a guy and a guy in waiting at running back. Whether it was Toby Gerhart, but like, hey, Stephen Taylor's going to be really good. Or, hey, I know Stephen Taylor's the guy, but Tyler Gaffney's going to be really good. Hey, I don't think Christian McCaffrey sat behind anybody. They had that one down year, and that down year was like their 7-5 year when they didn't have a guy at running back. And whoever is behind Bryce Love right now does not appear to be the guy of the future. So that changes the dynamic of Stanford on offense. As we know, they're built around that power rush and play action game with big tight ends and big pass catchers. So when a team like Utah with a strong defense forces Stanford to become one-dimensional, and for as many plays as KJ Costello has made this year, he can get rattled under pressure. He can make some mistakes. And ultimately, that's what did them in, even with throwing all over the place on this Utah team. But Utah on offense was able to control the ball on the ground, limit their mistakes. I thought Tyler Huntley was good or really good, especially given within the confines of where Utah has been offensively this year. So really, really nice win for Utah. I think Stanford's pretty limited up front on defense. And really, if I'm going to don my tiny little Oregon hat, This probably should be the third straight loss for Stanford.
Yeah.
It was good of Stanford to pull out that Oregon game, but I think this Stanford team, this is a gap year for Stanford, to put it in academic terms. There's not enough there on all levels, which is disappointing because they've recruited well, they've developed well. I think there's talent in the secondary, but they're not a 9-10 win team this year.
All right, before we move on, we're going to jump over to the Big Ten and go rapid fire through some of the other conference action. We do need to tell you about our good friends over at ZipRecruiter, Dan. As you know, there are job sites out there that are going to send you all the wrong resumes. And you got to sort through them. Yeah, I don't know. Then you got to wait to find the right candidates, get them to apply. That is not the smart way to hire. The smart way to hire is to go to ZipRecruiter.com/solid today. ZipRecruiter does not depend on people finding you. It finds them. It's powerful matching technology. That is what gives ZipRecruiter its advantage. It scans through thousands of resumes. They find the people with the right skills, education, and experience for your job. So you get the qualified candidates you want. You get them quickly. You don't got to sort through all the wrong stuff. Don't wait for the right candidates to apply. ZipRecruiter is rated #1 by employers in the United States. In case you're wondering, that rating comes from hiring sites on Trustpilot, which has over 1,000 reviews. Right now, our listeners can go to ZipRecruiter.com for free at ZipRecruiter.com/solid. ZipRecruiter.com/solid. Try it out. ZipRecruiter.com/solid. It is the smartest way to hire. And if you're on the flip side of things, Dan, and if maybe you're in the job market, why not give yourself the best possible chance of making a good first impression with a nice, clean, well-fitting Indochino suit?
I'd say that's very smart.
It is the world's most exciting menswear company. Indochino makes suits and shirts to your exact specifications for an unparalleled fit and the most comfort possible.
Oh, yeah.
With any kind of suit. All of it's available in a wide selection of high-quality fabrics and colors with the option to personalize details. Your lapel, your lining, your pockets, your buttons. Write your own monogram if you're feeling fancy. I don't know. Live your best life, Dan. Go with Indochino right now. Also, in case you're wondering, Indochino is now expanded into casual clothing. They've got made-to-measure chinos as well. They're quickly going to become your go-to pant. They pair easily with anything from a suit jacket to a sweater. Perfect for any time of year, any occasion. Boardroom meetings, Sunday brunches, sitting around on the couch. I don't know what you're into, but you can get them an introductory price. It's just $79. Our listeners can get any premium Indochino suit for just $359 at Indochino.com. Enter the code SOLID at checkout. That's a 50% off savings of the regular price for a made-to-measure premium suit. Shipping is free. Indochino.com. Use the promo code SOLID for any premium suit. Just $359 with free shipping. An incredible deal, Dan, for a premium made-to-measure suit.
You're a chino guy, right?
I like chinos.
Oh, my God.
I don't know about
I think
chino
we're both
guy,
we're just a couple of chino guys here, Ty.
Let's head on over to the Big Ten.
I love my chinos. Let's talk Big Ten.
Where do you want to start in the Big Ten?
I mean, I think Michigan is probably the place to start, given what they have coming up on their schedule.
All right, so Michigan wins 42-21 over Maryland. What'd you call this one on Twitter? A quiet crock-potting?
I think it was a quiet crock-potting because...
Hold on.
Oh, excuse me.
Honey, it's ready.
I've never, ever played that for a Big Ten team. And that's the quieter of the two crock-potting sounds that we have at our disposal.
I appreciate that. More restrained. Michigan was very good on both sides of the ball, and final score was 42-21, probably not even that close. Maryland scores at the end of the game in sort of garbage time. And I thought Shea Patterson did a good job. I had one very minor quibble that against Wisconsin, who, by the way, their defense looks far more mortal than we've seen out of recent Wisconsin teams, who the Wolverines have next week in Ann Arbor. But but against the better of the defenses that Michigan will face coming up, so they'll have Ohio State, obviously, is to stretch the field a little bit more with the receivers. Shea Patterson's team to rely on Zach Gentry. But this is picking nits, Ty, because I thought the offensive line is, I wouldn't say dramatically, but noticeably improved against a pretty strong Maryland defensive front with a lot of high-level talent. And they did a great job of limiting any sort of negative plays. I thought Shea Patterson looked comfortable, and confident behind them. They made plays, and defensively, Michigan was lights out, and that's especially without Rashawn Gary, who I think was out for this game, and just held Maryland completely down for 4 quarters. And I know it was sort of a slow start for Michigan, but at this point, Michigan's offense probably needs to score. And listen, this is a Wisconsin team that is beat up in the secondary and has issues in the secondary. A Michigan State team that's not probably going to score a ton. A Penn State team that is going to score, but Michigan, a couple of years ago handled them well enough. That's going to be a huge game for them, but that's in Ann Arbor. And then they finish in Columbus. So I anticipate this Michigan defense being good enough, no matter what the offense does, probably to get this team to 10 wins. Like they'll probably lose the Penn State game or the Ohio State game, but I think they can. I think they're talented enough to beat Penn State at home, and I'm suddenly a little less worried about Michigan State and Wisconsin.
All right, 42-21 Michigan wins. You did mention Ohio State. Ohio State wins 49-26 over Indiana.
Yeah,
this game was pesky. Indiana hung around. They really did. Until eventually Ohio State got enough distance and it wasn't too big of a question. But as you would expect, the numbers for Dwayne Haskins are just eye-popping. We're 6 weeks into the year and it's almost been normalized, which is kind of ridiculous and unfair to him. In this game, 455 passing and 6 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. He also had a very honest moment, I think, after the game when he talked about the energy at practice being down this past week because everyone was still tired for the Penn State win.
And it showed, especially early on in the game. I thought the play calling was pretty conservative from Ohio State, and when they did score, it was big play stuff. It wasn't driving down the field, and didn't really get going all that consistently on the ground. And I think that part of it is due to Indiana. I thought Indiana looked pretty strong up front and limiting Ohio State. Peyton Ramsey had a very nice game throwing the ball for Indiana.
He seems like he's getting better, Dan.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And I think part of that is there was a fearless quality to Peyton Ramsey throwing into the teeth of this Ohio State defense. They weren't getting a ton of pressure on him consistently. And I don't think it's terribly worrisome for Ohio State fans. I'd be a little bit worried about the penalties for Ohio State. It's never great when you shoot yourself in the foot consistently more often than your opponents. But with Dwayne Haskins, who just, even when he's under fire, he's just completing passes. He makes a couple of mistakes. He gets hit on one of the interceptions. But there is, for Ohio State right now, there are too many ways to win for them to be really all that concerned against teams that aren't the top of the Big Ten.
All right, I'm going to go rapid fire here through a few of the remaining games in the Big Ten, and then just jump in afterwards and let me know if you've got any thoughts that I missed. Mm-hmm. Wisconsin 41, Nebraska 24. Adrian Martinez came back and had a nice football game here, but ultimately it was Jonathan Taylor Thomas who ate in
Jonathan Taylor tailback.
Yeah, excuse me.
I hope it was Jonathan Taylor Thomas. Let's be real. It'd be amazing if it were.
24 carries, 221 yards, 3 touchdowns, including a long 88-yarder in the fourth quarter. Wisconsin wins by a 41-24 score. Also, Northwestern 29, Michigan State 19. Clayton Thorson threw the ball 47 times. Northwestern played good defense when it counted in the fourth quarter. Michigan State still can't really run the ball. They end up losing this one 29-19. Elsewhere, Iowa 48. Minnesota 31. Minnesota hung around for a while. They actually looked pretty good in the front seven and against the Iowa rushing attack, but the pass coverage just was not there without Antoine Winfield Jr., who's now done for the year because of a foot injury. Nate Stanley, 314 through the air and 4 touchdowns. Again, Iowa wins by 17. And finally, in the Big Ten, Illinois 38, Rutgers 17, 330 yards on the ground for the Illini. What did I miss? Anything?
So Illinois wins their first Big Ten game in almost 2 years. That seems, they're 3, they have a winning record.
No.
That's something. Iowa was uncharacteristically creative and open. They go for a big fourth down early and get it. They have a trick play that goes in for a touchdown in the red zone. And Nate Stanley does a very good job throwing the ball downfield against a Minnesota defense that's been pretty good. So nice to see that element emerging for Iowa. Northwestern, they are your classic Big Ten grower. They're the reason you like them before the season began, and to go to Michigan State, who has had injury issues and troubles up front, protecting Brian Lewerke. LJ Scott doesn't play for Sparty yesterday. So their offense is just incredibly limited, which is disappointing because their defense potentially has this incredibly high ceiling. Wisconsin is, as I mentioned earlier, beat up, and I think they had an ejection in the secondary. I would give the credit to Adrian Martinez, and it was Spielman, right, who caught a million yards for Nebraska. So good to see the fight from Nebraska. Ultimately, their defense is just a ways away, and Wisconsin's defense is coming a ways back a little bit, but that's okay because their offense looked pretty incredible. I thought the line did a great job.
Let's move over to the Big 12. 3 games here that we got to get through quickly. We had West Virginia 38, Kansas 22. This game was never really in doubt, but Kansas did hang around for a while. Will Grier, 332 passing, 4 touchdowns, also 4 turnovers, which they're going to need to clean up, especially as they go to Iowa State next week. Iowa State, by the way, Dan, a big win over Oklahoma State, 48-42. And you got to explain something to me.
I'm ready.
How the hell does Iowa State keep finding these third-string quarterbacks? How do they keep doing it? Third-string quarterback, Brock Purdy, comes in, second series of the game. He was ridiculous. 318 passing, 4 touchdowns. He also led the team in rushing with 84 yards and a touchdown. How do they keep harvesting third-string quarterbacks that are very productive? How does Matt Campbell do this year in and year out?
So there's obviously buy-in. So Brock Purdy, if you are a recruiting nerd, you will remember. So he's a true freshman from Arizona, I want to say. And so he had good high-level group of 5 offers, and then sort of last minute, Alabama comes in and offers, Texas A&M comes in and offers, ultimately commits to Iowa State, but he was looking at UCF, Boise State, schools like that. And he threw for a ton of yards his senior year in high school, but to come in as a true freshman, I guess it's good that we're into October. He wasn't counted on early, but Zeb Nolan, inefficient early on. Kyle Kempt obviously beat up. And for him to come in with that sort of confidence, a receiving core that is without their star from last season, and to immediately just... I guess there is something about Matt Campbell and his staff that gets these guys so confident and so comfortable within this offense. He runs, he throws. He goes, 18 of 23 for over 300 yards?
Yep.
Hakeem Butler has some big plays. Milton had a couple of big plays. I think one went for 60. So I think it is just the confidence and preparedness of Matt Campbell and his staff, along with the buy-in from these players. And Oklahoma State, Taylor Cornelius has a good game, and it's also Iowa State weathering, Justice Hill, making plays on the ground and through the air. And I think 4 different guys caught touchdown passes. So Oklahoma State doing everything they needed to do on offense. But ultimately, after that Boise State win, in which that defense looked so good, they've taken 2 significant steps back against Iowa State and Texas Tech.
And finally, in the Big 12, we had Baylor 37, K-State 34. Baylor -4 was one of my locks, Dan. The fact that they only won this game by 3 is pretty ridiculous. I am bitter. I am bitter about this because they basically could have blown out K-State. They made a lot of stupid mistakes. They had one of those halfback passes where the halfback decided before the play that he was going to throw it into whatever coverage. Just a lot of dumb stuff. They couldn't stop Alex Barnes on the ground, who had a big game for K-State, but ultimately they win on field goal here, 37-34.
Yeah, and I mean, there's the old adage of, first you lose ugly, then you lose close, then you win close, and then you win pretty, whatever. And so Baylor is in that perhaps, and granted, aside from that Oklahoma loss, that maybe they're going to win some games close, and that's a step up. Connor Brewer has a nice enough day. I like the day that they're both Denzel Mims, if you saw his ridiculous bobbling touchdown catch, and Jalen Hurd has a nice day. And Kansas State showing fight. Alex Barnes was ridiculous, both through the air and on the ground, probably better on the ground. So good for Baylor. This game was tied with 8 minutes left, and they close out a game against a team that is certainly beatable. And that's something. Also, just in terms of the first game you talked about, what are you doing, Will Grier? Three interceptions in the red zone. Santa Grier needs to be retired. Way too generous, especially with what West Virginia has coming up. But really fun day, I would say, in the Big 12.
All right, let's move over to the ACC quick. 4 games that we need to discuss here.
Yep.
I will run through them quickly. We had Clemson 63, Wake Forest 3, in what I'd describe as a good neck crack. Good neck
for
crack
3 different
game.
running backs, yeah.
Yeah, for Clemson. Trevor Lawrence was back. They had 3 running backs, all of whom had 10 carries, over 100 yards. What else could you say about Clemson, Dan? When they play like this is the kind of team and the kind of effort that I think we were expecting all along. Had some trouble a week ago against Syracuse with Trevor Lawrence going down. Ultimately, they pull that one out. Not too big of a deal, but 63-3. Yeah, this is more what we're talking about with the Clemson Tigers.
Yeah, Trevor Lawrence, to be expected, maybe a little bit of rust, even though he played last week, but coming back from an injury. He had some moments where he did show that situationally, but Clemson does the right thing. They lean on the talent in the backfield. They lean on the defense. And, you can play for both Clemson and for Georgia Tech, our murder sound, if you want.
Oh, yeah. I was waiting until we got to Georgia Tech.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So let's talk about Georgia Tech.
This is a BVG special game here.
And this one was personal, Ty.
This one was personal. Georgia Tech 66, Louisville 31. Louisville gives up. I can't even believe that this is a real thing. Mm-hmm. Louisville gave up 542 yards and 8 touchdowns on the ground.
Guess who just got murdered?
What a disgrace. BVG gets absolutely mauled on defense here as Louisville's defensive coordinator, as Georgia Tech goes on to win by 5 touchdowns.
Did you happen to see the drive chart for this game? Did you happen to? Let me. Georgia Tech just ran all over Louisville. Louisville is bad. I don't know if that's simplifying things, but offensively they make a little bit of noise at times. But wow. Georgia Tech, Taquan Marshall. Wow. I think I saw the drive chart on was Thursday night. This is how Georgia Tech started the game. Touchdown, 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 field goal, touchdown, 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 touchdown. Wow.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So Tech goes to 3-3 as the meat of their schedule shapes up, and the schedule is okay. They have a beatable Duke, a beatable Virginia Tech, a beatable North Carolina. Miami's going to be tough, a beatable Virginia, and they'll lose to Georgia. But sometimes they win against Georgia.
Okay.
I think they're going to lose to this Georgia team. That's all.
Go to NC State 28, BC 23. Boston College, a different team without A.J. Dillon. Didn't make the trip,
Yes.
Was hurt. NC State, a good effort here. They outgained Boston College by 200 yards. They held Boston College to 1 of 10 on third downs. NC State, a very, very quiet 5-0. Very quiet 5-0 at this point. Good on them. They've got some big-time action coming up, as we said. NC State squaring off against Clemson next week.
Yeah, Ryan Finley, a couple of mistakes, but ultimately very, very good in this game. And BC almost comes back, but excited to see what NC State can do as their opponents get better.
And finally, Pitt 44, Syracuse 37. This game featured a 75-minute weather delay followed by overtime. So if you were in the stadium, if you were at Heinz Field watching this game and you stayed for the full duration, you, my friend, are a true believer in Pitt or Syracuse college football. Good on you. A lot of points here. Syracuse basically cannot stop the run. That is what we're finding week in and week out.
Yeah, and it wasn't even a letdown situation from the Clemson loss last week, at least early on, because I thought Syracuse looked pretty sharp, in the maybe that was a weird saying. They did. They looked pretty sharp early on, but ultimately good for Pittsburgh's offense for staying patient and just giving the ball to Darren Hall and Kadri Ollison, who was just a total dude yesterday against the Syracuse defense, and a nice overtime win for Pitt in some weird circumstances, weird weather, and good to see it. I don't know how much better this makes me feel about Pitt, but their schedule's not terrible moving forward. They can win a couple more. And by the way, the Pitt uniforms with like the lighter blue and the yellow,
the powder blue,
they're so much. I don't know what shade of blue they are, but they're so much better than that navy and gold look.
Oh, it's not even close.
I love them.
Absolutely. All right, let's move to the SEC. 4 games here to discuss.
Yeah.
Alabama 65, Arkansas 31. Alabama won by 34. And true to form, Nick Saban was pissed off about his defense, giving up 31 points. Now, okay, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
The defense has to play better. But this team, Dan, is blowing out all of its competition. It's not even close. None of these games that we've seen so far from Alabama have been close. Tua Tagovailoa in this football game, 10 of 13, 334 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, 2 of which went to our friend Jerry Jeudy.
Yes.
I'm just struck by the fact, I wish I had deeper commentary on Alabama. I wish I could say something that hasn't already been said. But this team is so good that literally none of the games they have played through 6 weeks of the college football season have been competitive. None of them.
No, not even at halftime. By the half, they were out of reach. And yes, Arkansas did a good job building up offensive drives down the field. I think they had a fumble near the goal line once, unfortunately, for the Hogs. But I thought there was a good amount of buy-in from this offense and just fight given from where this this is an Arkansas team that lost to North Texas and Colorado State.
Yeah, that's right.
So pretty far away from where they imagine themselves to be in a couple years, I suppose. But yes, good for Arkansas's offense, moving the ball, not consistently, but more than most against this Alabama team. And I don't know if Tua threw more than a pass, if any, in the second half. So we're talking about an Alabama team that probably could have put 90 on Arkansas had they really wanted to. And this is something, by the way, Tua gets a lot of credit, rightfully so. These receivers stepping in, Jerry Jeudy especially, but Ruggs has done a very nice job, or Smith has done a nice job for, replacing guys at those positions. Damian Harris, obviously, Najee Harris back. But there is something and again, Tua is great and probably the best quarterback in college football. But we're dealing with, 2 new coordinators? Yeah. And they've gotten better. So it's Josh Gaddis from Penn State and Mike Locksley. I think Mike Locksley is sort of the guy running this offense, but maybe I'm wrong. But there's the openness and flexibility and ease with which Alabama is doing things on offense from the coaching staff on down it's so murdery.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Georgia 41, Vandy 13. The Dogs trailed in this game, Dan. For a grand total of 15 seconds before Jake Fromm threw a 75-yard touchdown pass to Terry Godwin. Godwin fought off a couple defenders, and before you knew it, Georgia was off to the races. Jake Fromm had a nice day, 3 touchdown passes total. Just another instance of a game in the SEC not being competitive. The only thing I'll point out here is that the Dogs had 13 penalties, and they've got a big game next week in a particularly spicy week 7 against LSU on the road. They got to clean that up against a team like LSU, but ultimately get the job done here with 28-point W.
Yeah, Georgia was just better. They overwhelmed them. There was a wave of dog that overwhelmed Vandy, and Jake Fromm, I think, continues to be... it's unfortunate that Tua is as good as he is if you are a Georgia fan, because he continues to just be great. And he's just not a god like Tua has been.
Yeah. All right. And what else we got here? Ole Miss, a big win over UL Monroe, 70-21. And finally, South Carolina, 37.
Weird one.
Missouri, 35.
It's gonna rain.
We had a nice little monsoon game here, Dan.
Yes, we did.
Will Muschamp, he was soggy.
Mm-hmm.
For one, it was weird because of the weather. For two, it was weird because Jake Bentley didn't play. He had the bum knee, which meant that we saw backup Michael Scarnecchia.
Yeah.
For the Gamecocks. He looked really good.
He outplayed Drew Lock.
We talked so much about Drew Lock and how we thought could throw on the South Carolina defense.
Right.
That wasn't really so much the case. It was Scarnecchia getting the better of an opposing defense yesterday in a wild game, back and forth, wet field, but ultimately it's South Carolina that wins the game 37-35.
Yeah, Missouri ran the ball well, which is nice to see for a down game from their passing attack. But yeah, I thought the story was South Carolina, not just Scarnecchia over the course of this game in ugly weather, but the fact that Missouri drives down the field, goes up by one late with a minute and a half, minute 20 left, and Scarnecchia then takes the ball and takes them back down for South Carolina to kick a game-winning field goal. That is a different kind of win to me for South Carolina, and cool to see from the Gamecocks.
And let's finally go on over to the Pac-12, Dan. Oregon was not in action yesterday.
Yes.
Which, it sounds like you're enthusiastic about that. But give me the lowdown on the conference as a whole. So we saw another beast effort from Laviska Shenault.
Yep, 4 total touchdowns.
We saw
and a nice win.
We saw some signs of life from UCLA.
Definitely.
And we've got 2 unbeaten teams in conference play in Washington and Colorado, and they face each other later this month, I believe.
Yes. So at the top, I would say, we already talked about Utah, Stanford, but there was a lot of, in my brain, thinking, Washington? What are you doing? What's going on? Just not a ton of rhythm on offense, and even defensively. UCLA was able to throw on this Washington secondary, a couple of big broken plays, and that I think it more speaks to UCLA's fight and belief in themselves, even in the face of starting the season 0-5. Dorian Thompson-Robinson showed and made the plays that should get Bruins excited about what this team could look like in a couple years. Weird to see Washington's defensive front pushed around like they were. Josh Kelly runs well for UCLA. They're in this game late. They string together a couple of nice scoring drives to make this a one-possession game. Washington takes this, but something very strange about this Washington team. Maybe it's a look-ahead thing going to Oregon next week. I can buy that, but this is UCLA.
Well,
this is it felt like Washington, it was just out of sync.
Look, Dan, we've been talking all year.
Yeah.
They haven't found that next gear on offense that we all thought they had.
Right.
It could be through 6 weeks of the year that it's not there. It could be.
Yeah.
They're very good.
Washington could just be good.
They're very, very
really
good.
Or great.
They're very good. But Washington as like this playoff contender preseason, thinking that they'd go out there and tear off people's arms and legs, that team may not exist.
Yeah, it's just that week in, week out, Washington performing to its capability just doesn't exist. That sort of consistency, that sort of focus and discipline just doesn't exist with this Washington team. Can they win double digits? For sure they can.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Should they beat Oregon and pretty much everybody left on their schedule? I don't think they play USC. Stanford looks much more human than normal. Colorado is tricky, but they have that game in Seattle. And I think they go on the road to play in the Apple Cup, but that's not a game they lose under Chris Peterson traditionally. Even though Wazoo looks good this year, looked good against Oregon State ultimately yesterday. Washington looks human, but a really good human, I guess.
There you go.
But like cool, it definitely cool to see, even with basically nobody there, UCLA playing hard. I like that.
Colorado wins by 7 over Arizona State. Colorado now 5-0 for the first time since 1998.
That was a big statement from their defense, holding up really strong against the Sun Devils late. N'Keal Harry doesn't play the second half, which sucks. He gets injured, but really nice from Stevie Montez to, Trevon McMillan had a nice day. Laviska Shenault, we're going to have to retire as a dude, like a TRL style retirement. Just because, yes, Laviska Shenault is a dude. You can set your watch to the dudeness of Laviska Shenault. Laviska.
Arizona State ran 6 plays in the fourth quarter, by the way.
Not good enough.
Colorado held the ball.
There's my take.
For 12 minutes and 44 seconds out of the 15 in the fourth quarter. They win.
Impressive.
28-21. You mentioned Wazoo briefly. They knock off Oregon State by a 56-37 margin. Oregon State, Dan, over their last 9 games versus FBS opponents, has allowed 50.6 points per game.
Yes, they have.
And still, it feels like they're getting better.
They definitely are getting better, and they're pulling out stops. We saw last night against Washington State on offense, on special teams, some trick plays, but executing and scoring 37 against this Washington State team. Granted, the Cougs were scoring pretty consistently, so they had the opportunities. But Oregon State, I think they actually have 3 or 4 pretty high-level transfers coming in. The quarterback that left Nebraska, a pretty good all-purpose player from Nebraska as well, a guy from Oklahoma. High-level talent is coming to Corvallis. We'll see how quickly that actually pays off.
Dan, can I ask you very quickly if you could dial up some Dvorak for me as well?
Oh, my gosh.
If you wouldn't mind. Arizona 24, Cal 17. After Arizona scored a touchdown and field goal on its first 2 drives of the football game, here is what you missed the rest of the way through, Dan. Let me know when I'm ready. Thank you. Punt, 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 end of half, interception, punt, fumble, missed field goal, punt, end of game.
Yeah, it was bad.
Not very good, but they do win. That being said, by a 24-17 score over the Cal Golden Bears.
Yeah, 7 of those points. Did you see the weird interception pick six? Yeah. Nothing like the interception run stripped. Somebody else picks it up and finishes the pick six. Yeah. Love that. It's the what is a group no hitter called?
The combined no hitter.
The combined no hitter.
Yeah,
love a good combined pick six.
And finally, another action. Just 3 more games here to mention. Briefly, San Diego State 19, Boise 13. A good job by San Diego State's defense holding Boise to just 13, forcing some
weird
turnovers.
Ending for Boise, yeah.
Weird ending. Utah State knocks off BYU 45-20. And finally, UCF 48, SMU 20. I didn't realize that UCF was all the way up to number 12 in the polls, but
they are.
UCF putting together another impressive campaign.
Yeah, and I would say, just before we reinforce some dudeness, you mentioned Utah State at 4-1, going to BYU and winning that game. That's pretty impressive. Houston needs to come back against Tulsa, but they're 4-1. Cincy 6-0. Cincinnati behind a really good defense. They'll be tested in the back half of their schedule. Buffalo 5-1. Temple 3-3, but a nice win over an improved ECU team. Illinois, we mentioned their first Big Ten win. NIU has that ridiculous non-conference schedule, but they're back to 500. They haven't lost in conference, so they're 3-3. Georgia Southern 4-1 after a nice win. San Diego State, you mentioned. USF, I think a lot of people sort of liked UMass to keep it close because they have a good quarterback. USF ultimately lays waste to them. They're a quiet 5-0. UAB and Bill Clark 4-1 after, only having a program for a couple of years after that cancellation. Hawaii is 6-1. Hawaii is bowl eligible, Ty.
Boom.
A nice win. Well, a pretty good win over Wyoming, who's definitely down this year. And Fresno State 4-1 after another really dominant defensive effort yesterday.
All right, there you go, Dan. That does it for your Week 6 recap here on the Solid Verbal. Don't forget, you can find all of our shows out on solidverbal.com or wherever fine podcasts are sold or distributed or downloaded for free. I know we've gotten messages from people out there who have been trying to listen on Stitcher and Spotify and other places. I don't really know what's going on and why we've had some difficulty getting the show posted in those spots. But we are working on it, and hopefully it should be resolved soon. So if you don't mind, please do keep the feedback coming and let us know if you experience any issues. We need to know about it. We want to make sure that everyone who wants to listen can listen to the show. We will be back on Wednesday to talk through Week 7. And I got to be honest here.
Yeah.
I've already started workshopping different names for next Saturday.
Seventh Heaven Saturday?
I like that we went secretly sassy.
Okay.
In week 6. So I've got a few ideas. That I'm
Showdown Saturday.
No. I'm going to work.
Savory Saturday.
I'm going to work through it, Dan. Savory Saturday is not bad, though.
Can I hear some dude sounding, please? Real quick, just an extra shout out. Brian Burns and that defensive line for Florida State. Laviska Chenault, you're retired. Just assume dude from Laviska. All 3 Clemson running backs just destroying Wake Forest. Braden Mann, once again, you have a dominant punter in the state of Texas. I'm going to shout him out. Great job for Texas A&M, who I believe had a touchback on a punt from his own 18, which, wow. Jaquai Polite for Florida. Sam Ehlinger, once again, doing everything for Texas. Nick Fitzgerald and his record-setting day against Auburn. Kadri Ollison for Pitt, once again, ridiculous day versus Cuse. Dexter Williams. Ty, come on, you got a guy in the backfield again.
That's right.
J.D. Spielman for Nebraska was all over the place against Wisconsin. Dicker the kicker with all sorts of stones versus Oklahoma for that game-winning kick. And then Derek Pitts was all over the place for West Virginia. I said I didn't like West Virginia's defense coming into the season, and granted, it's Kansas, but when somebody plays well, I'm going to tip my cap. Derek Pitts, great job.
All right. Well, those are your dudes for week 6. This is your podcast for week 6. We will be back on Wednesday and talk about a spicy week 7.
Ooh.
In the meantime, for that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself over here in Eastern PA, thanks again for tuning into the show. We'll catch y'all in a few. In the meantime, stay soft.
Peace.